Out of the question, human. You have to keep your species out of this war, or the Zorgons will brutally exterminate you all. Belos, the sole survivor on the crippled alien warship, screamed at the human squad that had boarded to render aid. The battered Rakari soldier's eyes darted around wildly as he gripped his plasma rifle, not taking aim but making it clear he was ready to fight if the humans didn't back off. When the distress signal from this remote sector first came through, Sergeant Ethan Henry and his men had assumed it would be a by-the-books rescue op. Help out some Rakari allies, maybe get in a skirmish with a few of these Zorgon pirates they'd been hearing rumors about. None of them expected this, to find a lone alien soldier, half dead himself, desperately ordering them to stay away for their own good. Belos slumped against the bulkhead, his face a grimace of pain and despair. He shook his head, mandibles clicking in agitation. You don't understand what you'd be getting into. The Zorgons. They're not just another hostile race. They're monsters. Pure evil. They have technology, weapons, ships, the likes of which you've never seen. The soldier's gaze grew distant, haunted by untold horrors. They don't just conquer planets, they shatter them. Billions enslaved. Entire civilizations wiped out. They feed on suffering, grow stronger from it. Belos looked up at Ethan, his eyes pleading now. The Rakari fleets fight them at every turn. We've slowed their advance, but at a terrible cost. We can't stop them, not forever. But you? If humanity gets involved, if the Zorgons see you as a threat, they'll descend on your worlds like a plague. They'll rip your fleets apart, bombard your colonies to ash. They'll make you watch as they break your people, body and spirit. Silence fell over the alien ship. Ethan's squad exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Belos's words sinking in. This was so much bigger than they'd imagined. The fate of entire worlds, of two sentient species, hung in the balance. Ethan clenched his jaw, mind racing. High Command would want to hear about this. Analyze the threat, weigh the options. But in that moment, looking into the eyes of this broken soldier, Ethan knew he couldn't just walk away. Couldn't leave the Rakari to face this nightmare alone. He stepped forward, offering a hand to Belos. I hear you. I do. But we're not going to abandon you to these bastards. You say we don't stand a chance. Maybe you're right. But if there's one thing you should know about humans, we don't like being told what we can't do. Stopping galaxy-conquering space tyrants, that's just the kind of impossible odds we live for. Belos stared at Ethan's outstretched hand, then back at his face. Something flickered in those alien eyes. Fear, yes, but also a spark of hope. You're fools, he whispered. Brave fools. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out and grasped Ethan's hand, allowing himself to be pulled to his feet. As the human squad helped Belos limp towards their waiting shuttle, Ethan's mind was already spinning with plans and contingencies. They'd need intel, allies, every scrap of data they could get on these Zorgons. It was a long shot, going up against an enemy like this, the mother of all underdog fights. But if there was any chance, any at all, of stopping these monsters, of saving countless lives across the stars, then Ethan would make sure humanity was there on the front lines, ready to show the galaxy exactly what his people were made of. The Zorgons wanted a war. They were about to get one they'd never forget. Back on the human ship, Ethan gathered his squad around a holographic display, the flickering blue light illuminating their faces. Belos stood to the side, his posture tense and guarded. All right, listen up, Ethan said, his voice steady. We need to find a way to hit the Zorgons where it hurts. Belos, you fought these bastards longer than anyone. What can you tell us about their tactics, their tech? Belos clicked his mandibles, hesitating. I shouldn't be sharing this information. If the Rakari find out I'm involving humans, they'll what? Court-martial you? Pretty sure that ship has sailed, buddy. Ethan's second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Novak, crossed her arms. We're all in this together now, so spill. Belos sighed, then stepped forward. His clawed fingers danced over the display, bringing up schematics and battle logs. The Zorgans, their strength lies in their coordination. Every soldier, every ship, they're all linked to a central AI network. It allows them to operate with terrifying efficiency. Ethan studied the data, his brow furrowed. So if we could disrupt that network even for a short time, it would throw their forces into chaos, Bellows finished, nodding. But the AI is heavily guarded. You'd need to physically access the core on one of their command ships. A slow grin spread across Ethan's face. Then that's exactly what we're going to do. Over the next few hours, they hashed out the details. Bellows, still reluctant but seeing no other choice, agreed to guide them through Rakari-controlled space and help them infiltrate the Zorgan vessel. Ethan handpicked his team, the best hackers, the most skilled fighters, those he trusted with his life. As they prepared for the mission, an uneasy alliance began to form between Ethan and Bellows. They spent long hours going over every scrap of intel, every possible scenario. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble, replaced by a grudging respect for each other's skills and dedication. And then it was time. Bellows piloted the cloaked shuttle through a dizzying array of jump points and nebulae, evading Zorgon patrols with hair-raising precision. When they finally reached the command ship, he docked them in a secluded airlock, the magnetic clamps locking on with a dull thunk. Ethan and his squad moved out, weapons at the ready. They swept through the dimly lit corridors, taking down Zorgon guards with ruthless efficiency. But the deeper they pushed into the ship, the fiercer the resistance became. Alarms blared and energy bolts sizzled through the air as Zorgan reinforcements poured in from all sides. "Keep moving!" Ethan roared over the chaos, ducking behind a bulkhead as a plasma blast scorched the wall above his head. "We're almost there!" They fought their way to the AI core, leaving a trail of shattered Zorgon bodies in their wake. But the cost was high. Ethan saw several of his own men fall, their cries of pain mingling with the harsh alien battle cries. At last, they reached the massive blast doors that protected the core. Jack, their tech specialist, got to work, his fingers flying over the access panel. "I'm in!" he shouted as the doors groaned open. But when they stepped inside, they found themselves facing a nightmare. The AI core was a seething mass of glowing tendrils and pulsing nodes, far more complex than any of them had imagined. Jack paled, his hands shaking as he jacked into the system. This is going to take time," he said, his voice strained. "More than we have." Ethan gritted his teeth, watching the door behind them seal shut. They were trapped, with no way out, and Zorgon forces bearing down on their position. He could hear them just outside, the thuds and screeches of them trying to break through. He looked at Jack, at the rest of his battered and bleeding team. They'd come so far, sacrificed so much. To fail now, to let the Zorgons continue their rampage unchecked, it was unthinkable. But as the seconds ticked by and Jack struggled with the alien system, Ethan felt a cold dread settle in his gut. They were out of time and out of options. He had a decision to make, and the lives of everyone on this ship, and countless more across the galaxy, hung in the balance. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of two species' fate pressing down on him like a physical force. No matter what he chose, there would be no victory here, only degrees of defeat. Continue the hack and risk total annihilation, or pull out and abandon the Rakari to the Zorgon's mercies. It was an impossible choice, but as the pounding on the blast doors grew louder and Jack's desperate curses filled the air, Ethan knew he had to make it. And he had to make it now. Ethan's heart pounded as he made his choice. "Jack, keep at it. We're not backing down now." Jack nodded grimly, fingers flying over the alien interface. "On it, Sarge." The rest of the team took up defensive positions around the core room. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Zorgan soldiers poured in. Ethan ducked behind a console, returning fire with his pulse rifle. To his surprise, Bellows appeared at his side, wielding a sleek Rakari weapon. "You humans are insane," the alien growled, "but I won't let you die alone." Together, they held the line. Ethan's world narrowed to the rhythms of combat. Aim, fire, duck, reload. Sweat stung his eyes as he called out targets. Sarah, on your left! Martinez, watch that flank! Wave after wave of Zorgons fell before their combined firepower. Belos' weapon cut through enemy armor effortlessly, but for every alien they dropped, 2 more took its place. Jack, how much longer? Ethan shouted over the din. Almost. Got it. Jack's triumphant yell was nearly drowned out by an explosion that rocked the ship. Alarms blared. The Zorgon attackers faltered, their movements suddenly erratic. Jack's virus had worked. Everyone, fall back to the shuttle. Move, move, move. They fought their way through corridors choked with panicking Zorgons. Ethan saw Belos take a glancing hit to his shoulder, but the alien kept pace. They reached the airlock just as another explosion rocked the vessel. Ethan did a head count as they piled in. 2 few, but no time to mourn. The shuttle detached, narrowly avoiding debris as the Zorgon ship tore itself apart. In the days that followed, reports flooded in. The Rakari, seizing their chance, had launched devastating strikes against the crippled Zorgon fleet. Belos stared at the tactical readouts in disbelief. You did it. You actually did it. But their victory was short-lived. New intel came through. The Zorgons, enraged, were massing for a counterattack. Their target, human space. We need to warn Earth, Ethan said. Prepare our defenses. Belos stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Our fates are linked now. Perhaps together we can stop these monsters once and for all. As they raced towards human territory, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He'd saved the Rakari, but at what cost? The real war was just beginning. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the Zorgon armada approach on the tactical display. Countless red dots swarmed across the screen, each representing a ship intent on humanity's destruction. They're coming in hot, Belos growled, his mandibles clicking with agitation. We need to move fast. Ethan nodded, turning to address the assembled fleet commanders. You all know the plan. Hit them hard, hit them fast. Keep them off balance while we make our move. As the human ships engaged the Zorgon fleet, Ethan and his strike team boarded their captured vessel. The alien ship hummed with unfamiliar energy as they maneuvered through the chaos of battle. Explosions lit up the void around them. A human cruiser erupted in flames, torn apart by Zorgon weaponry. Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the mission. They slipped past the flagship's outer defenses, the captured ship's transponder codes granting them access. As they docked, Belos turned to Ethan. Remember, these shock troops are unlike anything you've faced before. Stay alert. The moment they stepped onto the flagship, all hell broke loose. Zorgon soldiers swarmed towards them, their biomechanical armor pulsing with sickly light. Ethan's team opened fire, pulse rifles spitting streams of superheated plasma. They fought their way through twisting corridors, the ship's alien architecture disorienting and oppressive. Ethan saw good men fall, their screams cut short by Zorgon energy weapons. We're getting close to the core, Jack shouted over the din of battle. Just a few more levels. Suddenly, a massive Zorgon warrior burst through a bulkhead, catching them off guard. Its claws tore through one of Ethan's men easily. Before it could strike again, Belos leapt forward, his Rakari weapon humming with power. The alien blade sliced clean through the Zorgon's armor, dropping it in a heap. Ethan locked eyes with Belos, a moment of understanding passing between them. There was no time for thanks. They pressed on. Finally, they reached the core. Jack immediately set to work interfacing with the alien systems. Starting the upload now, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ethan and the others formed a defensive perimeter, tensed for the inevitable counterattack. The seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow. How much longer? Ethan hissed. Almost there, Jack replied. Just need to... A bone-chilling screech cut him off. The core room's massive doors began to slide open, revealing a nightmarish sight. A Zorgon unlike any they'd encountered stood before them. Larger, more heavily augmented, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Oh shit, Belos whispered. That's their supreme commander. The monstrous Zorgon raised a clawed hand, energy crackling around it. Ethan's team opened fire, but their weapons seemed to have little effect. As the creature advanced, Ethan realized with growing dread that they might have made a terrible mistake. The virus upload was their only hope now. But with this new threat bearing down on them, Ethan wasn't sure they'd live long enough to see it finished. The core room erupted into chaos as the hulking Zorgon commander burst through the doorway, flanked by a squad of elite guards. Their biomechanical armor pulsed with an eerie glow, casting sickly shadows across the room. "Jack, keep working," Ethan shouted, raising his pulse rifle and unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts. The air crackled with energy as human and Zorgon weapons fire crisscrossed the chamber. Belos ducked behind a console, his Rakari weapon humming to life. "We need to hold them off." The remaining human soldiers formed a tight perimeter around Jack, who hunched over the alien interface, fingers flying across the controls. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he raced to complete the upload. Ethan rolled to avoid a blast from a Zorgon guard, coming up firing. His shots found their mark, and the alien dropped with a screech, but for everyone they took down, it seemed two more poured through the doorway. The Zorgon commander towered over his troops, cybernetic implants gleaming beneath his chitinous armor. Energy bolts from human weapons splashed harmlessly against his augmented hide. "Our weapons aren't even scratching him," one of the soldiers cried out, panic edging into his voice. The commander's gaze locked onto Jack, recognizing the threat. With inhuman speed, he charged forward, swatting aside two human fighters like they were insects. Their bodies hit the wall with sickening thuds, and they crumpled to the ground, unmoving. Belos sprang into action, leaping from cover with a snarl. His Rakari sidearm spat a rapid-fire volley of plasma bolts, scorching the commander's armor. The massive Zorgon stumbled, momentarily disoriented by the assault. Seizing the opening, Ethan activated his energy blade and lunged forward. The humming edge of the weapon found a weak point in the commander's armor, slicing deep. Viscous fluid spurted from the wound as the Zorgon roared in pain and fury. But even grievously wounded, the alien was far from finished. Its cybernetic systems kicked into overdrive, flooding its body with combat stimulants. With a bellow of rage, it barreled towards Jack, who remained focused on his task, oblivious to the approaching danger. "Jack!" Ethan shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. Without hesitation, he threw himself between his friend and the rampaging alien behemoth. The Zorgon commander's massive fist connected with Ethan's torso. The sound of shattering bone cut through the din of battle as Ethan's body was hurled across the room. He slammed into a nearby console, the impact leaving a spiderweb of cracks in the alien metal. Ethan slumped to the ground, motionless. "No!" Belos roared, his voice a mixture of anguish and fury. The Rakari soldier's eyes blazed as he raised his plasma cannon. With a primal scream, he unleashed a devastating barrage of energy. The superheated plasma tore through the Zorgon commander's weakened defenses. Armor melted and flesh seared as the relentless assault continued. Finally, with a gurgling cry, the massive alien fell. "Upload complete!" Jack shouted triumphantly, his voice barely audible over the sound of fresh Zorgon reinforcements pouring into the room. Belos sprinted to Ethan's broken form, scooping him up and slinging him over his shoulder. "We need to move now!" The surviving humans formed up around Belos and Jack as they charged out of the core room. Alarms blared throughout the Zorgon flagship as the virus took hold, causing systems to fail and explode. They fought their way through disoriented Zorgon troops, the ship shuddering and groaning around them. Plasma bolts sizzled past their heads as they ran, the acrid smell of ozone filling the air. "There!" Jack pointed to an airlock ahead. "Our extraction point." As they piled into the shuttle, explosions rocked the Zorgon vessel. Belos carefully laid Ethan's unconscious form on the deck as Jack punched in the launch sequence. The shuttle detached from the dying flagship, narrowly avoiding debris as they rocketed away from the chaos. Through the view screen, they watched as the massive Zorgon ship began to break apart, secondary explosions rippling along its length. Back aboard the human fleet, medics rushed to meet them as they docked. Ethan was whisked away on a gurney, his face pale and still beneath an oxygen mask. Belos watched him go, mandibles clicking with worry. In the command center, General Harris turned as Belos entered. "Report!" he barked. Belos straightened, pushing aside his concern for Ethan. "The upload was successful, sir. The Zorgon command structure has been compromised." On the tactical displays, they watched as the alien fleet fell into disarray. Human ships pressed their advantage, picking off confused and uncoordinated Zorgon vessels. But their victory was short-lived. A priority alert flashed across the screens, and a chill ran down Belos's spine as he read the intercepted Zorgon transmission. "By the spirits," he whispered. "They're deploying a fusion pulse weapon." General Harris's face hardened. "How long do we have?" Jack, who had just entered the command center, spoke up. "Based on these readings, not long. If that weapon fires, it'll wipe out our entire fleet." Belos turned to Jack, his alien features set with grim. Belos turned to Jack, his alien features hardening with tenacity. "We must act now. The fusion pulse weapon cannot be allowed to fire." Jack nodded, his face pale but determined. "I've got a plan. We'll need to commandeer a shuttle." They moved swiftly through the corridors of the human flagship, the urgency of their mission palpable. As they reached the hangar bay, alarms blared, signaling the imminent launch of the Zorgon superweapon. Belos leapt into the pilot's seat of a nearby shuttle, his four-fingered hands flying across the controls. Jack strapped himself in beside him, interfacing his portable computer with the shuttle's systems. "Hang on," Belos growled as they rocketed out of the bay. The void of space erupted into chaos around them. Zorgon fighters swarmed like angry insects, plasma bolts crisscrossing the darkness. Belos wove through the melee with inhuman precision, the shuttle's engines screaming as he pushed them to their limits. "There," Jack pointed to a massive structure looming ahead. "That's the outpost housing the fusion pulse device." As they approached, automated defense turrets sprang to life, filling the space around them with a hail of energy blasts. Belos corkscrewed the shuttle, narrowly avoiding destruction as they careened towards a docking port. The impact of their less-than-gentle landing rattled Jack's teeth. They spilled out of the shuttle, weapons at the ready. The corridor ahead stretched into darkness, ominously silent. Belos took point, his plasma cannon humming with barely contained energy. They moved swiftly, footsteps echoing in the eerie quiet. At the first security door, Jack plugged in, fingers dancing across his hollow keyboard. "We're in," he whispered as the door slid open. They pressed on, deeper into the heart of the Zorgon outpost. Suddenly, the stillness shattered. A squad of Zorgon guards rounded the corner, their insectoid eyes widening in surprise. Belos reacted instantly. His plasma cannon roared to life, cutting down the first two guards in a blaze of superheated energy, the air filled with the acrid stench of burning chitin. "Jack, get that door open," Belos shouted as he laid down suppressing fire. More Zorgons poured into the corridor. Jack worked furiously, sweat beading on his forehead as he hacked the next set of security protocols. The door slid open with a hiss, and they dove through, narrowly avoiding a barrage of return fire. They found themselves in a vast chamber dominated by hulking alien machinery. At its center pulsed the fusion pulse device, crackling with barely contained energy. "We need to shut it down," Jack said, rushing towards a nearby control panel. A bone-chilling screech cut through the air. From the shadows emerged a Zorgon unlike any they'd seen before. Its body was a nightmarish fusion of chitinous armor and gleaming cybernetics. Jack's blood ran cold as he realized this must be one of the elite Zorgon commanders. Belos didn't hesitate. He charged forward, meeting the cybernetic monstrosity head-on. The clash of metal on chitin echoed through the chamber as they engaged in a brutal dance of violence. Jack tore his eyes away from the fight, focusing on the task at hand. His fingers flew across the alien controls, trying to disable the launch sequencers. A warning klaxon blared, indicating the weapon's imminent activation. The sounds of combat grew more intense. Jack glanced up to see Belos on the defensive, the Zorgon commander's augmented strength proving too much. With a sickening crunch, Belos went down, his plasma cannon skittering across the floor. The Zorgon commander turned its baleful gaze on Jack. In desperation, Jack activated his tech virus, attempting to hack the creature's systems. The commander advanced, unaffected. "Jack!" Belos's voice rang out. Jack saw his friend, battered and broken, reaching for something at his belt. A plasma detonator. Time seemed to slow. Jack saw the grit in Belos's eyes, saw him nod once, a final farewell. "No!" Jack screamed, but it was too late. The world exploded into light and heat. Jack felt himself thrown backwards, his ears ringing from the deafening blast. When his vision cleared, he saw the Zorgon commander was gone. And so was Belos. Grief threatened to overwhelm him, but Jack forced it down. He had a job to finish. With trembling hands, he completed the sabotage sequence, permanently disabling the fusion pulse weapon. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Jack could hear the thundering footsteps of Zorgon reinforcements approaching. He ran, his lungs burning as he searched for an escape route. A Zorgon fighter sat unattended in a nearby hangar. Jack leapt into the cockpit, his tech interface allowing him to bypass the alien controls. As he lifted off, he uploaded a viral data shunt into the outpost's systems. The stolen fighter screamed out of the hangar just as the first explosions rocked the facility. Jack pushed the engines to their limit, racing to outrun the chain reaction he'd set in motion. Behind him, the Zorgon outpost erupted in a cataclysmic fireball. The shockwave buffeted his ship, nearly sending him spinning out of control. But he held on, guiding the craft back towards the human fleet. Hours later, Jack stood before Ethan in the flagship's medical bay. Ethan's face was pale, his body wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were alert and questioning. "Belos?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. Jack shook his head, unable to speak. Ethan closed his eyes, grief etching deep lines in his face. When he opened them again, they burned with a fierce willpower. "We'll make this count," Ethan said, his voice growing stronger. "We'll drive these bastards out of our space. For Belos." Jack nodded, squaring his shoulders. "For Belos." In the days that followed, Ethan threw himself into planning the counteroffensive. Despite his injuries, he worked tirelessly, poring over tactical displays and devising new strategies. The human fleet rallied around him, inspired by his unwavering purpose. As they prepared for the final push against the Zorgon invasion force, Jack couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had lost much, but perhaps they had not lost hope. The fire in Ethan's eyes burned bright as he stood before the assembled officers of the human fleet. "We've lost good people," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the briefing room. "But we're not beaten, not by a long shot." He tapped a control, and a holographic display of human-controlled space flickered to life. "It's time we take the fight to the Zorgons. We'll hit them where it hurts, using every dirty trick Belos taught us." In the days that followed, Ethan threw himself into planning the counteroffensive. The bridge of his command ship became a hive of activity as he pored over intelligence reports and tactical simulations. Their first target, a Zorgon logistical hub in the Corvan system. Ethan hunched over a holographic display with Jack, studying the facility's defenses. "Their cybersecurity is tight," Jack said, fingers dancing across his interface. "But I've found a weakness. If we can get close enough, I can upload a virus that'll cripple their entire network." Ethan nodded. "Then that's what we'll do. Assemble the strike team." Hours later, Ethan led a small squad of elite operatives towards the Zorgon hub. Their stealth shuttle slipped past the outer defenses, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Zorgon sensors. They docked with the station, cutting through the hull with plasma torches. Ethan took point, his weapon at the ready as they moved through the alien corridors. "Jack, you're up," Ethan whispered as they reached a central computer node. Jack plugged in his device, his face illuminated by the glow of alien screens. "Uploading now," he muttered. Come on. Come on." Suddenly, alarms blared. Zorgon voices chittered in the distance, growing closer. Jack, we need to move, Ethan hissed, taking up a defensive position. Just a few more seconds, Jack said, sweat beading on his forehead. The first Zorgon rounded the corner. Ethan's weapon blazed, dropping the alien in its tracks. More followed, their insectoid bodies filling the corridor. Done! Jack shouted, unplugging his device. They fought their way back to the shuttle, Ethan's squad laying down, suppressing fire as they retreated. As they undocked, explosions rocked the station. Systems failed, lights flickered, and chaos erupted among the Zorgon forces. Back aboard the human flagship, Ethan watched tactical displays light up with reports of Zorgon ships losing power and drifting out of formation. It worked, Jack said, a grim smile on his face. Their entire supply chain in this sector is in chaos. Ethan nodded, already planning their next move. Prepare the stealth frigates. We're not giving them time to recover. Over the next weeks, human ships struck like ghosts in the night. Zorgon capital ships, caught helpless in space docks, found themselves under attack before they could raise shields or power weapons. Ethan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as another Zorgon cruiser erupted into flames. That's another one down, he said. How many does that make? 7 capital ships destroyed or disabled in the last 3 days, sir, his tactical officer reported. But the Zorgons weren't taking these attacks lying down. Reports came in of massive Zorgon fleets scouring space for Ethan's elusive strike teams. They're pulling ships from their frontline positions, General Harris said over a secure channel. It's buying us time to fortify Earth's defenses. Ethan nodded. Then let's give them something bigger to chase. His plan came together quickly. A small fleet of outdated human ships would play bait, luring a Zorgon battle group to the Thram asteroid belt. As the decoy fleet engaged the Zorgons, Ethan watched from the bridge of a cloaked command ship. Mining drones in position, his operations officer reported. Deploy the charges, Ethan ordered. Across the battlefield, human mining drones attached themselves to Zorgon ships, pinpointing structural weaknesses. Moments later, antimatter detonations ripped through the Zorgon fleet. Ethan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched half the enemy force reduced to drifting wreckage. But his victory was short-lived. Sir! His communications officer shouted. We're picking up a transmission from the Zorgon flagship. They're targeting a human colony. Ethan's blood ran cold as he saw the trajectory of the Zorgon weapons. How long until impact? 10 minutes, sir. Ethan's mind raced. There was only one option. Deploy all available drone fighters to intercept those warheads. We can't let a single one through. He watched, heart in his throat, as the unmanned fighters streaked towards the incoming Zorgon missiles. The drones threw themselves into the path of the warheads, exploding in brilliant flashes of light. When it was over, the colony was safe, but Ethan's fighter squadrons were decimated. We can't keep trading resources like this, Jack said, his face grim. We need a game changer. Ethan nodded, an idea forming. What if we could blind them? Make it impossible for them to see us coming. Jack's eyes lit up. I might be able to hack their sensor networks, but we'd need one hell of a distraction. Ethan smiled, a plan already taking shape. I think I know just the thing. How do you feel about dusting off some old-fashioned firepower? As Jack worked his magic on the Zorgon networks, Ethan oversaw the deployment of Earth's long-abandoned nuclear arsenal. The primitive weapons weren't elegant, but they were brutally effective. System after system erupted in atomic fire, forcing the Zorgons to divert precious resources to contain the fallout. With the enemy distracted and their sensors blinded, Ethan gathered his forces for the final push. Set course for Skepara 4, he ordered, his voice filled with purpose. It's time we end this war. The human fleet surged forward, a constellation of deadly purpose against the void. Ethan stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the tactical display showing Skepara 4. The ravaged planetoid loomed before them, its orbit jam-packed with Zorgon defenses. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Ethan ordered, his voice steady. Pulse detonators, fire on my mark. A chorus of acknowledgments crackled over the comms. Ethan watched as the first wave of destroyers accelerated, their engines flaring bright against the darkness. "Mark!" Brilliant flashes erupted across Skapara's defensive perimeter. Pulse detonators tore through the minefield, creating a temporary corridor. Lance fire from the human capital ships lanced out, striking orbital gun platforms with pinpoint accuracy. But the Zorgons weren't caught unprepared. Return fire blazed from hidden emplacements, catching several human destroyers in devastating crossfire. Ethan gritted his teeth as he watched friendly signatures wink out on his display. "Push through," he commanded. "We can't let up now." The fleet pressed on, weathering the storm of Zorgon counter-battery fire. As they closed in on the planet, Ethan strapped himself into a drop pod. He'd lead the ground assault personally. The descent was a hellish blur of fire and turbulence. Ethan's pod slammed into Skapara's blasted surface, its hatch blowing open on impact. He emerged into chaos. Zorgon troops swarmed across the landscape, their chitinous forms moving with alien grace. Towering walkers strode through their ranks, energy weapons blazing. Ethan's Marines were scattered, fighting for every inch of ground. "Form up on me," Ethan shouted, his rifle spitting death as he advanced. "We push for the docking pylons." They fought street by street, building by building. The Zorgons contested every step, their inhuman shrieks filling the air. Ethan saw good men fall, their armor crumpling under sustained fire. As they neared the armored vehicle depots, the Zorgon resistance stiffened. Waves of mechanized units poured from reinforced hangars, threatening to overwhelm the human forces. "We're pinned down!" a sergeant yelled over the din of battle. "Sir, we can't hold this position." Ethan's mind raced, searching for options. Then his comm crackled to life. "This is Firebase Charlie," a gruff voice announced. "We have you zeroed, General. Danger close fire mission incoming." "All units, take cover!" Ethan bellowed. The sky ignited. Streams of tungsten rained down, turning the Zorgon armored units into superheated slag. When the barrage lifted, Ethan led his remaining forces forward, using the tactics Belos had taught them. They struck fast and faded away, denying the Zorgons clean engagements. Slowly, painfully, they advanced towards their objective. In orbit, the space battle raged with titanic fury. Human and Zorgon ships traded devastating broadsides, their hulls lit by the fury of their exchanges. But thanks to Jack's cyber warfare teams, the Zorgons fought half-blind, their targeting systems unreliable. Back on the surface, Ethan and his dwindling squad finally reached the main docking nexus. They plunged into its labyrinthine corridors, fighting through elite Zorgon guards wielding strange, crackling weapons. Psy-shock weapons," Ethan warned as he saw a Marine convulse and fall. "Don't let them touch you." They pressed on, their numbers shrinking with each engagement. Just as hope began to fade, Ethan's comm lit up with an incoming transmission from Jack. "I've got something for you." Jack's voice came through, tense but triumphant. "Uploading schematics for their PSI shock defenses now." Ethan's HUD flickered, new information scrolling across his vision. A grim smile spread across his face as he processed the data. "This is it, people," he said to his remaining soldiers. "One last push for Earth." They surged forward, using their newfound knowledge to neutralize the Zorgon's most potent weapons. They burst into the docking control center, securing it against waves of reinforcements, while Jack worked his magic remotely. Alarms blared as systems began to overload. Fires erupted throughout the complex, fueled by venting propellants. Victory was within their grasp. Then reality itself seemed to tear. A massive Zorgon materialized in the chamber, its carapace adorned with pulsing cybernetics. In its claws, it wielded a blade of pure psionic energy. Ethan watched in horror as it cut through his remaining Marines with terrifying ease. Then those alien eyes fixed on him, filled with hatred and rage. Ethan raised his rifle, knowing that the fate of the war now rested on this final confrontation. Around them, Skapara burned. Ethan raised his rifle, but the massive Zorgon closed the distance with unnatural speed. A swipe of its psionic blade sliced through Ethan's weapon, cleaving it in two. The severed barrel clattered to the deck, still smoking. Ethan's combat knife flashed into his hand as he narrowly avoided a follow-up strike. The alien's blade crackled with energy, leaving a trail of searing light in its wake. Ethan's enhanced reflexes kicked into overdrive as he parried and dodged, feeling the heat of near misses singe his flesh. Flames licked at the edges of the control center, consuming consoles and melting view screens. Ethan's boots scraped against debris as he was driven back, the Zorgon's relentless assault pushing him towards the Inferno's edge. Just as his strength began to waver, Jack's voice crackled in his ear. "Ethan, I've got something. Uploading Ricari data on their neural shielding now." Information flooded Ethan's HUD. He blinked, processing the data even as he ducked another sweeping strike. The pattern. There was a pattern to the Zorgon's attacks. Ethan feinted left, then struck. His fist connected with a specific point on the alien's carapace, a Ricari stun strike targeting its cerebral cortex. The Zorgon staggered, its psychic defenses momentarily disrupted. Seizing the advantage, Ethan pressed forward. His knife found weak points in the alien's armor, striking at neural clusters with surgical precision. The Zorgon's movements grew erratic, its strikes wild and unfocused. With a final, desperate lunge, Ethan drove his blade deep into a critical junction. The psionic weapon fell from the alien's grasp, clattering across the deck as limbs separated from its body, the wounds instantly cauterized by the heat. A psychic scream tore through Ethan's mind as the mortally wounded overlord collapsed. The entire chamber shuddered, rocked by explosions from the human bombardment above. The deck beneath Ethan's feet groaned and buckled. He sprinted for the exit as metal tore and warped. Behind him, the Zorgon overlord tumbled into the gaping maw of a reactor pit, disappearing in a flash of plasma. Ethan staggered into the last remaining shuttle, its engines already spooling up for emergency launch. As they rocketed away from the disintegrating structure, Ethan watched Scapara's surface erupt in a series of cataclysmic detonations. The shuttle docked with a heavily damaged dreadnought. Ethan limped onto the bridge, finding Jack hunched over a sparking console. "We did it," Jack said, his face smeared with grime and sweat. "The Zorgon shipyards are gone." Through the viewports, Ethan watched as Scapara's artificial ringworld shattered, the debris field expanding to encompass the entire planet. The remnants of the human fleet regrouped at the system's edge, battered but victorious. Jack's fingers flew across his interface. "Initiating broadcast now. Let's see who's still out there fighting." A signal pulsed outward, carrying humanity's defiant message to the stars. For long moments, there was only silence. Then, one by one, replies began to trickle in. Coded bursts from distant systems, each representing another civilization ready to stand against the Zorgon threat. General Harris's hologram flickered to life on the bridge. His expression was grim as he delivered his report. "We've dealt the Zorgons a critical blow, but the cost..." He paused, steeling himself. "Casualties are in the millions. Many of our outer colonies have been hit hard by retaliatory strikes." Ethan nodded, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. He turned to the viewport, gazing out at the star-filled expanse. Despite the losses, despite the devastation, hope burned bright. The Zorgons were vulnerable, and humanity was no longer alone in the fight. Ethan stood tall on the bridge of his crippled dreadnought, his uniform stained with blood and scorch marks. As the coded replies continued to pour in, he knew that this victory was just the beginning. The next phase of the war loomed on the horizon, promising new challenges and unforeseen dangers. Ethan stood at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the battered remnants of the human fleet. The acrid smell of burned circuitry filled the bridge, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Sparks showered from damaged consoles as technicians worked feverishly to keep systems online. "General, incoming transmission from Earth Command," a communications officer called out, her voice strained. Ethan turned, his face etched with exhaustion. "Put it through." General Harris's hologram flickered to life, distorted by interference. Ethan, the situation is critical. We've lost contact with Proxima Centauri. New Melbourne is gone. The Zorgons hit hard and fast. Ethan's fists clenched. Casualties? In the millions, Harris replied, his voice heavy. But that's not all. We're getting reports from across the sector. The Zorgons are on a rampage targeting every human world they can reach. As Harris spoke, data streamed across the tactical displays. Colony after colony winked out, each representing thousands of lives snuffed out in an instant. There's more, Jack interjected, his fingers flying over his console. I'm picking up transmissions from resistance cells, not just human ones. Looks like your broadcast stirred up some hornets' nests, Ethan. Encrypted messages flooded the comms, a cacophony of alien languages united by a single purpose, defiance against Zorgon rule. Ethan leaned over Jack's shoulder, studying the incoming data. Can we verify these? Jack nodded. Already on it. Sir, if these numbers are accurate, we're looking at a potential allied force that could rival our own fleet. Before, Skapara. The implications hung in the air. A chance to turn the tide. But at what cost? An alert chimed, drawing Ethan's attention to a priority message. His eyes narrowed as he read the orders scrolling across his personal datapad. They want us to abandon the Verdant Haven colony, Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. Leave millions of refugees to die. The bridge fell silent. Every officer present knew the stakes. They'd fought and bled to protect those innocents, to give them a chance at survival. Ethan's gaze swept across the bridge, taking in the faces of his crew. He saw the same mixture of exhaustion and dedication mirrored in their eyes. We didn't come this far to abandon those we swore to protect, Ethan declared. Gather the resistance commanders. We're going to finish this. Minutes later, the bridge was crowded with holographic projections of alien resistance leaders. Some were familiar faces, others new allies drawn by the promise of victory against their common foe. Ethan stood before them, his voice raw from smoke inhalation, but unwavering in its intensity. We have one shot at this. The Zorgon fleet is crippled, but they're not out of the fight. If we strike now, we can end this war once and for all. He outlined his plan, an audacious attempt that would require every ship they could muster. As he spoke, Ethan could see the gravity of the situation settle on each commander's face. This is a one-way trip, a Rakari leader observed, his compound eyes gleaming. You ask us to die for your people? Ethan met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. I ask you to die for all our people, for every world that's suffered under Zorgon oppression, for a future where our children don't live in fear of extermination. A chorus of agreement rippled through the assembled commanders. One by one, they pledged their support. As the last transmission faded, Ethan turned to his crew. You've all heard the plan. I won't order anyone to come with me. This is volunteer only. Not a single officer moved to leave. Ethan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Then let's do this. For Earth, for our allies, for every soul counting on us. The dreadnought's engines roared to life, the deck plates vibrating beneath their feet. Across the system, Allied ships fell into formation, a ragtag armada united in purpose. Ethan took his place at the helm, his hands steady on the controls. All ships, this is General Henry. Commence Operation Armageddon. The fleet surged forward, drives flaring bright against the void. Before them lay the broken remnants of the Zorgon armada, still formidable despite their losses. As they closed the distance, Ethan's voice rang out one final time. For Earth! The human dreadnought led the charge, plunging into the heart of the enemy fleet. Energy weapons lashed out, tearing through Zorgon ships with devastating force. But for every enemy vessel destroyed, human and allied ships fell in turn. Ethan's vessel shuddered under the impact of multiple hits, alarms blaring as systems failed. Yet they pressed on, deeper into the maelstrom of battle. Through the chaos of the engagement, Ethan's eyes remained fixed on his target, the massive Zorgon command ship at the center of their formation. If they could take it out, the entire enemy fleet would be thrown into disarray. All power to forward shields, Ethan ordered as they closed in on their final objective. Prepare to...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.